It is just wildly inappropriate. And yet, I'm really glad you're here.
Your actions were totally inappropriate.
For some reason, he felt that it was inappropriate.
Look into the camera and say something inappropriate.
You don't get personal. That is totally inappropriate behavior.
How inappropriate!
What exactly about my methods are inappropriate?
He tweeted some inappropriate things.
That's a little inappropriate, don't you think?
At what point is it inappropriate?
No, inappropriate. Inappropriate. Stop it right now.
Toby, that is unbelievably inappropriate.
You're vulgar. You're inappropriate.
That's just grossly inappropriate.
Wow, you are so inappropriate.
It's such an inappropriate description.
Inappropriate, but precise.
Oh, you know what's inappropriate?
It's completely inappropriate. Why?
That's inappropriate! That's inexcusable!
Inappropriate things.
Be totally inappropriate.
Inappropriately so.
How very inappropriate, thank you.
Inappropriate.
It's wildly inappropriate.
This is incredibly inappropriate.
This is highly inappropriate.
Okay, this is inappropriate. Grossly inappropriate.
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 Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, and this is Inappropriate Characters. We're here for our Halloween edition alongside Venger Satanis and Ryan Davis. Venger, providing the gong sound effect. Really good.
Was that loud enough for you?
Yeah, I thought that was great. So tonight, we're going to be talking about several things, but the main topic is that because this is the only, this is the closest we are going to be to Halloween, we're going to talk about Halloween-themed stuff and horror, and in particular, the question of what is interesting in the horror genre of RPGs nowadays, and has Cthulhu jumped the shark? I would argue that Cthulhu jumped like 12 sharks since it was actually cool. But anyway, this is what we're going to discuss. Also, of course, we'll be answering your questions. So if you have stuff to comment in the chat, please do. And if this is your first time here, well, please check out our channel and subscribe and hit the like button and share it wherever you think it'll be interesting or wherever it'll piss people off. We don't care either way. So, Ryan, you're the MC here. What do we got planned for tonight?
Well, you ran it down pretty well tonight. We could take it in pretty much whatever order you want to do it in. That's what she said. But we, at least according to what we were talking about, we were going to talk about Halloween first. It's spooky season, everybody. So it's my favorite. Absolute favorite. Halloween is my favorite holiday. Autumn is my favorite season. I'm living it up, binging horror movies, doing all of that stuff. I couldn't be happier. At least
what horror movies have you binged so far?
Every year I go through the Phantasm series. That's like my thing, right?
That's cool.
The Tall Man. Yeah. I revisited Ju-On, The Grudge, the original Japanese one this year. We watched the first two Halloweens so far. We watched The Black Phone. I don't know if you guys saw that. That was released a year, 18 months ago. And I have a real bone to pick with modern horror movies because they're just not good. That one was a good film, and we really enjoyed that one. What else have I seen? Poltergeist, if you count that. I mean, is the season, so I forgot how poorly Poltergeist had aged until I saw it this year, and we've got a bunch in the queue. There is a Lovecraftian one that's an independent film from last year called Older Gods. I don't know if you saw that, Venger.
I have not.
Spectacular. It's $1 on Amazon. Get it. It's worth every penny until the last 10 minutes, as is the case with every modern horror movie. But it is, Lovecraft is never done right on film, ever. And it's probably one of the best that I've seen.
Yeah.
The female cultist. Sorry, what?
Lovecraft has been overdone in every genre except TV and film because they can't really get it right there. They did The Color Out of Space on, what was that, Nicolas Cage? Was Nick Cage in there? No, it really was him. It really was him. That by itself is Lovecraftian, him being in one of those, But still, that's the one place where Cthulhu is not ridiculously overdone,
I see it as, and maybe we're jumping into the topic too soon, but I see it as tradition now. It's kind of become like a horror tradition, right? It becomes repetitive and cliche and too much until you jump the shark, and then it becomes cool again. And then it becomes tradition. Then it becomes just a normalized part of the holiday season or the horror genre. It's a cultural touchstone, I guess, for horror, sci-fi horror, cosmic horror, and it's entered the cultural awareness so much that almost everybody knows what Cthulhu is.
That's part of the problem.
It's part of the problem, but it's also, on the flip side, it's kind of cool because people know about Jason Voorhees and they know about Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers, and they also know about Cthulhu. If you want to, reach down and get what do they call it? A deep cut, like B-side or something like that. Well, then you can bring in Yog-Sothoth or Nyarlathotep, Azathoth, Tsathoggua, whatever.
Stealing my thunder for the big knockout fight with Pundit here. I am trying really hard to keep my mouth closed. But
Would both be on the same.
Might happen.
You guys are probably going to be arguing for Cthulhu versus me against. I was gonna. Well, okay, let's get into this. Karl Marx once said that history repeats itself twice, the second time as tragedy and the third time as farce, right? And I think that's super clear in what happened with kind of the Cthulhu mythos, in that the Cthulhu mythos had its classical period, right? Obviously when Lovecraft and these other guys were alive, right? And the dude that wrote Conan, his name escapes me at the moment, and
Robert E. Howard,
August Derleth, and all these guys, right, that were involved in the original creation of the mythos. Yeah, Howard, thank you. And then it continued to be kind of like this underground cult classic of horror for several decades, right? And then I think that one of the things that actually was the first problem that happened with Cthulhu was that it became one of these things that the hippies discovered and then brought into an element of pop culture. So you saw in the 70s, suddenly they were reprinting and publishing these Cthulhu stories, usually with really trippy covers and stuff. And then Gygax put it on into D&D, right? And then Chaosium made Call of Cthulhu. But the problem is that right there, if you compare, let's say, the Call of Cthulhu of the early RPGs which, I mean, I love Call of Cthulhu as a game, right? It's a very well done game. I think everybody agrees that it's one of the classic RPGs of our hobby, right? But if you compare the whole deal of Call of Cthulhu the RPG versus the actual novels, they're totally different. Like the second one is a kind of weird recreation with in the form of what somehow like some kind of pseudo-intellectual imagines that Cthulhu is supposed to be like, right? Like, so like in Call of Cthulhu the RPG, for example, the default is that you're playing these characters who are these kind of hapless investigators, university professors or dilettantes or something, and like it's actively discouraged in the game for you to be a tough guy, a combat type of guy, because that's too much like D&D. I think in trying to make it not like D&D, they also made it less like Cthulhu, right? Because in Call of Cthulhu, it's true that there's a lot of the mythos stories that do involve helpless victims, but there's also a ton that involve people that are badasses, right? And like in the actual Call of Cthulhu, in the story, they solve the problem by ramming Cthulhu with a boat, like that's the solution. Whereas in the role-playing game, they'd be like, oh, no, you can't do that. No, that goes completely against everything that the Cthulhu mythos stands for, right? And it's like, what? It's in the novel, So they turned it into this kind of tragic, pretentious version of Cthulhu. And then 20 years after that, and by the 90s, suddenly Cthulhu becomes a part of the bigger pop culture consciousness, as nerd culture becomes part of the main pop culture. And then you've got like, I don't know, Cthulhu plushies, and you have, I'm just waiting for like Cthulhu Kitties, the animated TV show on Saturday mornings, right? Like they turn it like or like Teen Titans Go, right? But with Cthulhu, like it's gonna done by Cal Arts, like because which that would really be, Lovecraftianly evil. But in any case, the problem is that it's now been turned into like Watchmen babies, Watchmen babies be for vacation, like it's become so ridiculously sanitized and bowdlerized and reduced into a consumer product that it's not what it's farce, so that's the problem with Cthulhu. Once everybody knows what Cthulhu is and has reduced it to a toy you'd give your toddler, then that's not good horror anymore.
Well, I agree with you on the I call it the cute Cthulhu. You've got the Cthulhu plushie, you've got the Cthulhu button, all of the merchandising stuff about it. But what I think gives the genre a bad rap is the adoption of Cthulhu, because Cthulhu is just one, and not even in the top tier of the elder gods that were written in that whole mythos. And there's a lot of other creepier cerebral stuff.
Well, True Detective season 1 proved you could, like, that was the most badass Lovecraftian story that I've ever seen. Thing that I've ever seen put on television. That has a connection to the Lovecraftian mythos, with Carcosa and all of that, like that was really, really well designed. And of course it was because it didn't mention Cthulhu anywhere,
Right.
And it wasn't about tentacles, like the whole tentacle thing is kind of overdone.
But if it had Cthulhu tentacles, wouldn't it have been that much better?
No, it wouldn't have.
Not necessarily. There are some older gods that don't have the tentacles.
The essence of horror in the mythos is not supposed to be, oh, there are these weird alien creatures with tentacles, and aren't they gross, right? It's meant to be, we live in a meaningless universe. It's the crisis of modernism, which also doesn't work anymore because people are postmodernist and they're like, oh yeah, cool. Right. We want to live in a meaningless universe. We are the savages Lovecraft warned you about,
Right. But I'm of the persuasion that tentacles almost always make things better.
We know, Winter, we know.
But hang on, you touched on something very interesting, Pundit, a few minutes ago, and that seemed to say and I don't know if this is your point. I don't think it was, but I'm going to argue for it, that Call of Cthulhu, in taking Lovecraft's mythos and trying to gamify it, actually made it more awesome and more scary and horrific and badass. Because, like you said, in Call of Cthulhu, the players couldn't just defeat Cthulhu by ramming a ship into him or something like that. Call of Cthulhu took the Cthulhu and the mythos and the older gods in a direction where they were so much more powerful and above us, and we could only hope to tangle with their lesser minions, which means that instead of using brute force, you have to use like knowledge and education and things like that to outwit cultists and the high priests and maybe even the gods themselves, instead of being like, try to defeat Shub Niggurath with a wrecking ball, with Miley Cyrus on top of it, just going, woo!
I would pay to watch that movie.
I do get what you're saying there.
With tentacles.
What I think that happened with Call of Cthulhu the RPG was that first, there was the deities and demigods thing, and so the Cthulhu stuff was in D&D as monsters, and just like as the gods in D&D, they were all statted out as if like the idea is you could go and kill Thor, or you could go and kill Niggurath or whatever, right? They had stats, they were monsters, so you could kill them, right? And I think that the Call of Cthulhu people looked at that and said intentionally that they wanted it to be a different take, and that over time, since the publication of Call of Cthulhu, that has changed every time, at least until quite recently, for the worst. In that that what started as something to say, look, this RPG is not like D&D. You can't just go and kill monsters. That's not the point, which was good. That's a good thing, what they were saying there, right? Turned into something where they were saying, no, your character shouldn't be fighting at all. Your characters shouldn't be heroic. Your characters should be kind of like hapless victims. And I know that because I played a lot of Call of Cthulhu in the late 80s and all through the 90s. And I remember that as time went by, it became more and more to that point where there were groups and people writing stuff that was saying basically, any character that tries to be good at combat, that guy should be just kicked out of the group and stuff like that, right? And they were saying, well, in some games and in some written, material, they were suggesting that basically for the characters to have any possibility to win in any way was kind of wrong, because like I think a lot of this was done by people who hadn't read a lot of Lovecraft, but who had an idea in their head of what Lovecraft was, right? And so they were saying, no, what has to happen is that all the characters at the end of the adventure have to either die or go crazy, right? They really shouldn't be able to actually stop this thing, or if there's a way to stop it, it has to involve their own destruction as well, because that's what we think Cthulhu is, and the only thing it can be, right? Which ignores a whole bunch of the Cthulhu mythos, and that's why you got other games that came in, like Raiders of Riley, right? And even Delta Green was, I think, created originally as a foil to that, where you're playing these, military guys that are going in to kill the Migo or whatever, So like it just went too far into this kind of pretentious literary take of Cthulhu that is not actually like Cthulhu were adventure stories. Actually, they were like they were part of the pulp genre. They were pulp horror, but they were still part of the pulp genre, right? So there was a lot of times where it was, there was meant to be action, and there were people that fired guns and all that sort of stuff, Yeah.
Timothy Shanks stole my thunder here, saying that Chill was pretty cool, and I guess I'm in the minority here. I don't like the system or the mechanics for Call of Cthulhu. I prefer, whenever we run a Lovecraftian horror campaign, to use Chill for it. I know you guys were saying we played it, and we've all played it. I don't like it because it is a little too involved and it takes you a little bit out of it. You know, story gaming has a bad rap right now, but the story is so critically important when you're talking about anything that's Lovecraftian that you really want to bring some other elements into it. And I think Chill was just a better vehicle, at least for my tables, to do that.
Well, I saw the ads for Chill all the time in like Dragon Magazine and even on the shelves at the local hobby store. I don't know what it was. I don't know if I just felt like, well, I have Call of Cthulhu, so I don't really need another dedicated horror game.
Right.
Or maybe it was the artwork, or maybe it was just like, well, it's kind of like Call of Cthulhu, but different mechanics, and then you're more fighting like Dracula and Frankenstein or ghosts instead of
it's very sandboxy. You can do
I don't know. So I don't really have any experience with Chill just because I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger. And one of the mistakes was I was constantly judging a book by its cover. And that's why I never bought the Ghostbusters game, role-playing game, because it said like a frightfully like cheery horror game or something. And the fact that it was supposed to be cheerful, I was just like, well, that seems more like for kids. So nah. But, you know, I tried it as an adult and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I love the mechanics too, like the D6 dice pool. I think it's fantastic. So they inspired the West End game Star Wars, which is even more fantastic. So I judged a lot of books by its cover. I wish I could go back and try more games like Chill and Ghostbusters, but I didn't. So I've got to either experience them now as an adult or never.
I don't like dice pools. I do like the Chaosium system, but the other horror RPG that I quite liked when I was starting out in RPGs was Beyond the Supernatural by Palladium. That was quite good. They had their own kind of horror mythos, you could say, that was not Lovecraft. It was in some parts very similar to Lovecraft. There are some monsters that you could just port right into the Lovecraft universe, let's say. But they also had other stuff, like, you know, you could play psychics or wizards, and you could, you know, there was more emphasis on action. It was I think quite nice in that sense.
And just like that,
some more comments
failed his sanity check.
While Venger is recovering from his sanity check, let's check out some of the other stuff it says.
I'll be right back. Gotta brush someone's teeth.
What you have to do. So TST1 says, I love Lovecraft, but the problem is Cthulhu has been taken to be the entirety of the mythos, when to me it's really about verisimilitude, giving way to the dread and despair of inevitable doom. Yeah, that's kind of what I said. One-Legged Frog said, Cthulhu will be riding a combat wheelchair soon. Kovenizer says, Cthulhu as an anime girl is kind of funny. Raziel says, In the Mouth of Madness is a good attempt at Lovecraft adjacent stuff. Yeah, in Mouth of Madness is probably one of my favorite horror movies, since you guys were talking about it. I think it's the sort of horror movie that I really end up being impressed by. Like, it was just, to me, it was chilling. But there's you know, like, monster stories are not all that scary to me. I don't get easily frightened by jumping scenes in the TV or something. Judd Gossett says, Vance's new game can be more than just Cthulhu and still be cosmic horror. Okay.
Yeah, that's sort of where I was gonna go with my end of this. Is Cthulhu is overplayed, and I don't think that any of the three of us would argue that it's not, right? But there's just more. There's more meat on the bone, and there's a lot of stuff that's not. It's a lot of psychological horror, right? And I'm going to mispronounce it. Syzygy, the cosmic alignment, is often thought of as equal in power to some of the mid-tier to high-tier elder gods. You can do some amazing things with that. There's a lot of meat left on the Lovecraft bone. Unfortunately, everyone just looks at the Cthulhu bit, and that's where we're at. Chat is on fire with everything that they are throwing out at us. Everything from the different systems that they preferred, Good question from L. Is White Wolf horror at all, or just cheesy? We all had our. I don't know. I can't speak. I had my White Wolf moment, and I think I am very much on record that was because I was dating said goth girl that really liked White Wolf. But
now,
I played it.
Apart from using it to hit on goth chicks, I'm good. I can understand. I'm good with that. Yeah, and I did some of that myself in the 90s. But no, I never liked anything of the storyteller system. I thought right from the start, you know how I'm extremely allergic to pretentiousness. They were just like horribly pretentious right from the beginning in every way.
It's not. I don't know. I don't think it's pretentious. The storyteller system. You guys talk about what, like vampire and stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was cool.
I can see there are some people who didn't play it as pretentious, right? Like there are a lot of people that took vampire. If you read like the original vampire RPG, the Mark Reinberg one, it is all about like you're supposed to play this guy who is riddled with guilt at his loss of humanity, and it's like all of this kind of melodramatic giving of personal horror at the fact that you have become a monster, right? And you're supposed to kind of mope around in that for most of the game, right? Most people look at
there's like 5 different things going on,
and they said, "Fuck that! I'm going to be a badass vampire in a katana and a trench coat," and then they started, like they were some kind of weird vampire Highlander parody or something,
Yeah. That was really the moment where we saw really mainstream acceptance of main character syndrome, right? Was with the White Wolf syndrome. At least from my eyes at my tables, that's really where those hooks got sunk in, and now we're reaping the benefits from that with an entire segment of the hobby.
Well, don't you think that D&D just in itself is kind of main character syndrome
now?
I mean,
did
back in the day, like originally. Like you're playing these characters, and the campaign or the one shot or whatever is about you and your.
Well, okay, but originally, right? Like I'm actually running Tonsberg right now with the old school Arneson rules that are in Tonsberg and everything. And besides being incredibly lethal, right? It's also, I think it really emphasizes it. There's like the oldest of the old school dungeon crawls, right? It emphasizes that. So much of it there is like not about you playing your individual PC a lot. It's about the group, right? And you're like part of the team, right? It's almost like a team exercise to go into the dungeon and do all this stuff, And you never would have had a character in the context of like that system and in that time that would have been like, well, this is my guy and he's got this super special backstory and this is how he dresses and blah, 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 right? Like.
But as soon as you get away from the military, the militarism of role-playing games, you start getting into the drama and the narrative and the story, and you're a main character. And what are you going to do with that main characterness? As the protagonist, you're going to like go out and do something, and then the world at least from your perspective, revolves around you. I mean, obviously the world outside of your gaming group of the PCs, but the campaign, to a large extent, is all about you. Like, you're right. Like the Tonsberg, and I played that. I played that at VentureCon with Griff that ran it. You have to work as a unit, and if you don't work as a unit, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
But you said the key phrase. You said, of course, main character syndrome is going to exist because you are a main character. And that's the key phrase. It's a main character as opposed to the main character.
The difference is that in White Wolf games, that was one of the first places where all of a sudden there really wasn't a PC party. Everybody was playing a different PC. You might be doing stuff together. You might be doing stuff apart. You might be doing stuff against each other, right? And that doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing, but it leads to the fact that all of a sudden everyone can start imagining themselves, instead of as people in the world, they can imagine themselves as the protagonists of a movie or a TV show. That's kind of what I think Ryan is getting to there.
Yeah. Okay. Now that I've heard that, I totally see what you're getting at, and you're absolutely right. Because when it comes to the storytelling games, and let's just say Vampire the Masquerade, yeah, your characters don't have a specific role to play in an adventuring party. You are more or less an individual, and you exist within that narrative chronicle, along with other individuals that you might get along with, or be part of the same faction, or at least in the same city, and so you interact with, or maybe help each other out on occasion. But you're right; it's a totally different type of game that doesn't rely on cooperation like D&D does.
Yeah.
So let's put this out there for everybody. If you're going to run a horror Halloween, we'll call it mini campaign, right? 6 to 10 good quality sessions. What system are you going to run, and what theme are you going to run?
Okay. Before we get to that, though, I want to mention two interesting comments here from the chat.
To be continued.
Judd Goswood said, no, we'll get right back to that. But Judd Goswood said, Sandy Peterson admitted that the game that is called Cthulhu was originally titled Nemesis after a Lovecraft poem, and that he was intentionally trying to de-escalate the combat aspect of the game, right? So it was, that's a very interesting point, right? And then Overkill Joe says, describing basically how you were meant to play Call of Cthulhu the RPG is, stay in the back of the group, put cotton in your ears, keep your eyes shut, and never ever read anything, right? Which is, ironically, it means that if you were playing it like to survive the game, you were kind of playing the opposite of how it's meant to be in the kind of like in the stories, right? Because you knew that it was, the whole system was set up to fuck you, right? Like to just completely screw with you.
That's
all right. So you were saying, what would be the best system for running a one shot or a short campaign or something like that is Halloween themed? And that's a very interesting question, because I was actually, one of the things I wanted to talk about in this episode is about what are the RPG alternatives, especially that are around today, for the Lovecraftian horror genre. What horror RPGs are there that aren't just Lovecraftian? But we can also mention the Lovecraftian ones. And certainly one thing Call of Cthulhu the RPG can be used for very effectively is a one-shot or very short campaign that is, meant to be thematic of the horror genre. So I will grant you that's a good one. So is Beyond the Supernatural, I guess, though I haven't played that in years, but it certainly fit. Now I actually just ran yesterday, because it's the closest I'm getting to playing on Halloween. In my Sword and Caravan campaign, I had the player. Now that's not a horror game, obviously, but I made it into a horror session by having the players. They were around Kermanshah in the Zagros Mountains, and they had heard that near that town there are these weird burial mounds, and they went to go and investigate, and it turned out to be like basically the lair of a really horrific undead creature from the Indo-Persian mythology. That the session ended with like two of the characters had just exploded, and one of them was now possessed. Another one had gone nuts and ran away and lost himself in the hills. So it was that was quite the horrifying deal for them, but it was awesome. They all, like, after today, a bunch of them have messaged me saying how great the session was, because it was just epic. So it went quite well. And they were, when the moment, like, it was a real build up, because at first they go into the mound and there's, some skeletons, and they're like, oh, this is tough, but we can handle it, right? Remember that this campaign is not one where they're constantly encountering supernatural monsters, right? Most of the time, the nemesis that they're dealing with are people along the Silk Road, but when they go off road, then that's where the weird shit is, right? And so they had fought, a zombie or two before, so they knew about skeletons. They could handle that. And then there was the next layer of the place had some ghouls, which are like the, not ghouls like D&D ghouls, but GUHL, right, which are the standard kind of Middle Eastern, Persian, and Indian zombie, right? And those guys were tougher. They were a little scary because they're a lot faster, and their main muscle NPC that was with them got like double critical by them, and he was left like basically he was alive, but he was like he couldn't even walk, right? So they lost their big gun there, and they're like, oh shit, this is tough, right? And then they're like, looking around, they're being very cautious, and then they get to the place where there's like the corpse of this dead king, and he's got this sword there. They're just sure that it's a magical sword because they'd seen an example of that type of sword before, and then when they go up there, they have this whole plan to go and like grab at it, and then the spirit of him awakens and fireball everywhere, and it was just crazy. They had a great time. All right, so I don't know. What do you guys think? What would you recommend as the best game right now, be it Cthulhu or non-Cthulhu, to run for a Halloween game?
Well, if you're running a one-shot, and I already blew my shot because I said how I have great love and fondness for Chill. I don't know if you guys have read 10 Candles. Now, you do need the right group for this. Because if you have the wrong group that's not willing to take a step back and adjacent to the side to go into that narrative realm, it's not going to work. But 10 Candles is dark, it's gritty, it's got an interesting timekeeping mechanic, and everybody dies. Right up front, no bones about it. You know that it's not going to be, much to Jeffro's chagrin, a game you can win. Right? Everybody is going to die. It's what you make of the moments that you have that make that entire session. It's a great one shot. It's very different and so not in line with what we think of as OSR by any stretch of the imagination. But it is a great story, sort of spooky season Halloween experience. Obviously, there's Chill. I really, really love Chill if I'm going to do a more traditional role-playing experience. Those are my votes. And Michael McLaughlin in the chat with a super chat, $2. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. He threw his hat in for anything World of Darkness. We ran Mage longer than we ran Vampire back in the day with said hot-ass goth girl. Venture, what are you running?
Scott Ruddy in the comments said, Lamentations of the Flame Princesses, the monolith from beyond space and time, is a great example of cosmic horror without the tentacles. And there's a lot of Lamentations books and adventures that are really good horror fantasy stories that are very interesting and generally are not tied to the Cthulhu mythos.
That's funny that you mentioned that comment because I was scrolling back earlier when you were talking and I saw that comment and I replied like literally just 2 minutes ago. And I said, going back earlier to Scott's comments, I don't actually like the monolith from Beyond Time and Space. I only own like 3 or 4 Lamentations products. And that's one of the ones I got because of the name. And I don't know, I was just kind of disappointed with it. It had some cool ideas, but it just seemed like a total fuck you to like screw with players and like ruin the game and make, even if it's just a one shot, halfway through, you're just like, okay, well, everybody's fucked because
it's not a game if it's not fun.
We all lost our limbs, and they're in some other dimension, and now we're just like a torso in the forest, just like rolling around in the leaves, and like that's the end of the adventure. It's like, what the fuck? I don't know. So give me tentacles because that's I don't know. That's what I like. So anyway, going to the question of the night. After the Chult campaign, which just ended a month ago. Just because of inertia and I didn't have enough time to really prepare anything, the one shot that I ran directly after the Chult campaign was more Chult. But then 2 weeks later, I actually wanted to run something really different, and I ran Call of Cthulhu, which went over really well. And I think we're going to do more Call of Cthulhu next weekend, or this coming weekend. So I think that would be my answer, is Call of Cthulhu. I don't know. Just depends on the kind of horror that you want to do. I grew up with not only Lovecraft, but the Call of Cthulhu game. And so I think just instinctively, I find it easier to conceptualize how that scenario goes. Whereas if you threw me into Beyond the Supernatural or Chill or some other horror game, I would have to imagine like how a session or how a whole campaign of that would go. And I'm just going to scratch.
I don't remember who said it, Benjamin, but somebody in the comments pointed out that the Chill RPG is basically Hammer horror movies, the RPG, and that and that's pretty cool. Hammer horror. I mean, it's in cool. Some ways easier than Cthulhu, right? But in another sense, it's like so much more classic as well. And it's got its charms, you could say.
So does Chill? Okay, so assuming that's true, which I have no reason to believe otherwise. What does gameplay kind of look like? Like the Foundation, is it like investigative, or is it more like adventuring, like a little bit more like D&D, or is it something else?
Out of the
I guess
box.
It depends how you run it. I guess it depends how you run it.
Right. If you go on book out of the box, you are all members of a regional, national, international, supernatural investigative things. I always thought of it as kind of like an X-Files-y sort of feel that they're trying to impose on you. So it's very investigative. It's very, it's all.
But you're a monster hunter, basically, right?
You are a monster hunter. You are the modern day Van Helsing. Now I've done a lot with it. Like I skinned it back for Cthulhu to the 20s. We've run it forward into near future science fiction horror too. I've done a lot with the system, but out of the box, you are some sort of investigator with this organized group of monster hunters. So you are.
So it would be like a Renaissance Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of.
More Men in Blackish, right? Because there is structure to this organization.
Okay. So I'm thinking more like less Buffy and more like the Watchers Council.
Yep.
Type thing. Okay.
And I'm partial to the Mayfair printing of it. I know I'm going to get boos and hisses, but I
So I would say, first of all, if you're stuck on running Cthulhu, one of the things that is a real fact these days, and I mean, a lot of people probably have the old Call of Cthulhu books, and so that's fine, right? But we've got to say that probably people should not buy modern books by Chaosium because they've gone woke as fuck, and considering that Chaosium wrote some of the greatest adventures and campaign books of all time in RPGs, the garbage they're coming out with now is just pathetic, right? But luckily there are alternatives that are essentially Cthulhu OSR, I guess you could say. They're like Cthulhu derived products that are being made by people who are not stuck on making Cthulhu about BLM or something like that. So like the one I would recommend to everyone, and that I helped design the main book in a consulting capacity, is Raiders of Riley, right? Which is by Quentin Bauer, and it's an excellent system. And what it is it is absolutely the Cthulhu mythos, but it's set a little bit earlier than the standard. The Call of Cthulhu is set in the Roaring 20s usually, and Raiders is set in the period from like 1910 to 1914 or so. So it's like just before the Great War, and it's a pulpier version of Cthulhu. You're playing. It's inherent that you're you can play, wealthy dilettantes or college professors, but you're also completely able to play, like tough guys, hunters and sailors and things like that. And they've also just recently come out with this incredible, huge kind of source book / sandbox campaign thing called From the Tideless Sea, which is, it's got some elements reminiscent of like the material in Masks of Nyarlathotep, but it's not as organized a campaign. It's more like a sandbox setting with a whole bunch of really interesting parts and incredible historical research that went into it. So if people haven't heard about Raiders, they should check it out if what they want is Cthulhu. But I do think that there are also some great alternatives to people who want to have stuff that includes horror elements that are from sources other than just Cthulhu. And obviously one of them that I would recommend is The Invisible College. The Invisible College RPG. It's OSR. It's written by, one of the definitely non-woke people in the hobby. That is to say me. And
to say we know that guy.
Yeah, and it's got you can play secret agents and magicians. There's ways to organize your group and make campaigns that go everywhere from like street level weird adventuring to like cosmic super adventures to like jet setting, kind of almost James Bond meets cosmic evil, sort of secret agent adventuring. And, even like there are rules there for trying to influence mundane organizations in the direction of, like kind of like an Illuminati type of game, right? Where you're trying to these secret orders are trying to control the aspects of the mundane world to drive them either more towards a new dark age or to bring them into a world of illumination. And the supernatural elements, it's full of, there's demons, there's monsters, there are, evil Nazi villains and these weird guys that want to turn everyone into bugs and these guys that just want to dominate the world, and all of that sort of stuff. And all of the kind of supernatural menace of it is based on historical sources from mythology and the occult world. So it makes it for very interesting material. I've always said that there isn't any fiction that is as interesting as history. And if you think that the Lovecraftian mythos is interesting, well, you should also take a look at, like Clopothic demons from Hebrew lore or the darker entities of the kind of occult world,
I've been looking at
the book, as Joe Kuja said. It's a beast, a lovely book, fantastic body of work on that one, mate. Thank you, Joe.
I was going to say we got
T Stone, I guess, is you really poured your heart and soul into Invisible College, and it shows. Now, another thing I would recommend, so it's not just me shilling my own products, besides Lamentations, which we've already mentioned, is the Wretchedverse. It's got tons of stuff that would be like, the Belle Epoque, everything from like, adventuring in kind of the dirty Victorian age, the underside of the Victorian age, all the way to like Wretched New Flesh, which is like horror cyberpunk. Like it's incredible some of the books that those guys have put out, and I'm always happy to recommend those as well as being like excellent sources for this sort of thing.
I was going to say it's an excellent segue. We got another super chat. Thank you very much for thoughts on non-horror games as horror one-shots. I think a good game master can do just about anything, because part of the prep, it isn't necessarily sitting down and scribing out what's going to happen step by step on your railroad. It is being able to adapt the different situations, monsters, and play styles into any system. So you could skin just about anything, with the exception of freaking Horse Girl, into a horror game, right? So if I were to pick one that matches this question, I don't know. You could do it with AD&D very easily and very capably. And I don't think that there is a problem with that. So, Avenger, you got anything else that's a non-horror game that you would throw some scare juice on?
I mean,
stumped him.
You could do.
Stuck on
There's just so much. There's so much. I mean, if I really think about it, there's a lot that I want to do. Lord Mattias had a great blog post over on his blog where he was talking about horror and Spelljammer, and then this guy commented something on Facebook, and he said something about like Event Horizon, and then so it made me think that, you know, wouldn't it be cool if you had some sort of campaign or wherever you normally set your adventures that had space travel? Like, for instance, you know, if I was going to run Schalt again, you know, include aliens and some Alpha Blue stuff, and, you know, there's space travel and the Federation. If whenever they want to create an artificial wormhole, they went through, I don't know, something called like the Hell Void or something, which is basically like the darkness that ship goes through in Event Horizon.
That's how 40K ships
when they
travel
fold
to.
space. Yeah. And then that, you know, basically you got Hellraiser in space.
Right.
Then that goes into, so you can extrapolate that stuff into whatever game you're normally playing. So you could do that. You know, if you're doing like a Western, it'd be cool to like, not necessarily like Deadlands, but you can include like cool, I don't know, traditional like vampire, like Hammer stuff, Dracula versus Billy the Kid, if you wanted to go that more humorous route. There's just so much. You could include horror in almost anything. So the possibilities are mind-boggling. It's hard to pick just one thing.
Well, you know, the Wild West was full of its own like creepy horror stories, you know, and so like there's a lot of like not even touching on all the stuff from, you know, Native American culture, like but you know, there's that, and then there's like eerie cowboy stories that have been basically untouched for 100 years now. So there's a lot of stuff that somebody could take advantage of there. Joe Koo mentioned Over the Edge, which is great, except that the new edition has again gone woke. But I'll point out that Wretched New Flesh by Red Room is like their setting for that, the city of Avalidad, is basically based on the same inspirations that were the product of Over the Edge. So if you liked Over the Edge, you might want to check Wretched New Flesh out.
And I'm going to make something for Wretched New Flesh very soon. I'm kind of in between projects. I just need to get some more stuff off my plate and really drill down and think about it. But I'm going to create something for Wretched New Flesh because I think it's really cool and I want to contribute to that. I also want to help out the Red Room. Their sales have been down lately, so anything to boost their market is a good thing for the entire OSR and the independent industry. So check out Wretched New Flesh. And
Wretched Darkness. If you want to go straight horror, Wretched Darkness is superb.
Yeah. I got to go soon. We should get to shilling if that's cool.
First, you got to read out a super chat there before anything else.
I do, and this one's for you,
okay.
Brendan. It's from Snowman0147. Plan on a supplement based on other occult magics, RPG Pundit. Like to see some voting. So, what do you want to take that? That's all you.
That might happen. It's always possible. Someone else I saw mentioned about like doing Invisible College and other eras. I know that the next campaign I'm going to run of Invisible College, which I haven't started yet, but that I'll be doing at some point in the future, in my own gaming group is going to be the Invisible College in the 1930s. You know, and they're instead of the Black Lodge will still be around as enemies, but that'll also be when, you know, the Nazis were full on loaded with all these occult groups that were trying to help them conquer the world. So that could be interesting. And I don't know about. I mean, I have actually done quite a bit of research on Afro-Caribbean magic. I might someday be drawn to write something about that, but I can't be sure. I guess we'll have to see. So yeah, maybe it could happen. It's not going to happen anytime too soon, but.
Well, let's shift gears before Venger has to go off and dream up some more nightmares, and
let's do the shilling part.
Let
then.
him do his shilling thing here. Let's see. How about we start with Venger tonight?
Go for it.
Alrighty. We're still a little bit off, like a month off from my releasing the Chult webcomic and associated Alpha Blue and Purple Islands webcomics, or webcomic Chult GPT hybrids. So I'm going to have that to look forward to next month. And then way in the forward, in January, I'm going to do a new Kickstarter for book 4 of the Chult trilogy. So excited about that. Right now, just kind of like focusing on making these cards, these Chult X cards. I've got some new work in progress ones up in my in the craft room where like the kids do some of the artwork, and I use it too because I'm also an artist of sorts. So yeah, you got these cards. They got the Corthalis Meta Sigil on the back, and then you got all the things that make Chult. Your pop culture, horror, grindhouse, exploitation. So basically, for the people that don't know, I've talked about this a bit on my blog and on my YouTube channel. But instead of the safety tools that we know and loathe, the X cards, instead of raising an X card and then putting a halt to whatever's going on that the game master then has to erase or skip over, or create like a crying closet off in the corner with some cotton candy for people to like chill out on so they don't get triggered by, I don't know, spiders or something. These will just sit at the middle of the table, and then you pull one, and then you hold it up, and that lets the game master know that you want the current thing or the next bit, scene, encounter, whatever, to include more science fantasy. And if the player has his own suggestion on how to do that, that's great. Otherwise, the game master can solicit opinions from the rest of the table or come up with something in his own imagination. Or if you have like a random table ready, you could just roll on that. And then you reward that player with, for me, it would be a point of divine favor, because that's the meta currency I use with Crimson Dragon Slayer and my Chult games. But you could reward the player with any little, I don't know, token or advantage or whatever. And that allows the player to have that little bit of extra creative control and participation in the game. I think it's fun as a game master, because not only does it keep me on my toes, but it encourages me to make, for instance, Chult more Chultian. Because sometimes when I'm running Chult, I get stuck in like what I call D&D mode, which is just like, oh yeah, the enter this cave, and there's these weird dudes with these weapons, and then you guys fight and stuff like that, and just by inertia, you get stuck in this rut sometimes. But then a player can snap you out of it and be like, oh, but hey, or it could be a little bit more post-apocalyptic, and then your imagination starts flowing, and your creative juices, and you're like, oh yeah, and and maybe they've got some sort of like abandoned nuke from a bygone age that was never used, never exploded, and now now there's that added to the game, and stuff like that. The more you use it, I feel like the better you get at spontaneity, improv, things like that. So I don't know. I think this is kind of like the new thing that for people that use it is going to improve their games and make them just that much more awesome. And of course, VentureCon 3, and that is in July, Madison, Wisconsin. So yeah, get your weekend badge, and then you can game with me and 40, 50, 60 other people all weekend long, and it's going to be fantastic. There's going to be old school OSR, traditional vintage games going all weekend. It's going to be awesome. So yeah, grab a ticket and join us.
Spectacular. Pundit, what do you have going on?
Well, my latest product right now is Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, which is ostensibly a source book for Sword and Caravan. It's got 120 pages or so of biographies and stats for all the historical NPCs that appear in Sword and Caravan. But you can also end up using, I mean, there's some that are very famous there, Genghis Khan and Richard Lionheart and Saladin and so on. But there's also a ton of characters there that probably most of your players will never have heard of, and that you could easily incorporate into your other fantasy games. It's also got the stats for the assassin class in because everybody demanded it for Lion and Dragon, and some new high-tech devices of the Song Empire. It's got an expanded timeline from the one in Sword and Caravan, not longer in history, but rather more details year by year with adventure cues of what your player characters can be doing at certain points in the campaign. And it's already a bestseller on Drive-Thru and has been doing quite well on Amazon as well. You can get it in either of those places. In terms of upcoming stuff, well, I've been currently, I mentioned already that I've been in talks with Giant Slayer Games about setting up a subscription service of a new series of short products similar to RPG Pundit Presents. That's still currently in the planning stages with them, but I'm hoping to hear back from them and get stuff moving pretty soon. So that might be coming up fairly shortly. I think it depends on how quickly they get things in order there. And of course, I've got all my other existing products. I want to mention that in the chat, Timothy Shanks just said, he said, anything in Dark Albion can end up being a horror game. And, he's right in a way, since that's the theme of the night. I'll point out that in medieval authentic settings, be it, in Dark Albion or in Sword and Caravan, the medieval world monsters are horrific in almost all of the context of the medieval world. And so there's, an element of alienness and scariness to all types of supernatural creatures that you don't tend to find as much in conventional fantasy, where they're just like either treated as animals or weird looking humans, basically. And that's not how it is if you're running medieval authentic games. So both, Lion and Dragon and Sword and Caravan give you a totally different perspective on supernatural creatures that are generally, as even in run the course of the ordinary campaign, running into them is spookier in some ways than you're gonna be used to if you're running, I don't know, the Forgotten Realms or something like that. And that's certainly going to be true of my upcoming product, my next big book, which is Baptism of Fire, where the monster compendium, as well as a lot of the magic stuff, is going to be coming out of Slavic mythology, especially Polish, but also other parts of the Slavic mythological world. And I mean, I'm not really a huge fan of The Witcher. Ironically, I always keep making stuff that ends up being connected to video games or TV shows or books that I haven't read or played or watched, you know, but you know, there's a lot of people already. Some of the people have been kind of in the playtest aspect of Baptism of Fire said, oh, this is like The Witcher. You know, I didn't know that, but okay. It makes sense that it would be, right? Because obviously that gives you the Witcher series in whatever of the versions of it give you a look at like these really weird and creepy monsters that exist in Slavic mythology. So if that's something that you like, you're probably going to enjoy that book when it comes out. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I'm pretty sure that even as we speak, we've got Chris Miller was on here. I don't know if he's still around, but he is hopefully working on it right now, and it should be coming out sometime in the next several months. I can't say for sure when. Maybe in the comments he'll give an update of how far along he is on that. But for now, check out Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road. Check out all my other products. You can, if you go into my YouTube channel and any video, you click to expand the description, and you'll see links to all my stuff. And I guess that's everything.
Awesome. I've got very little this week that I can actually talk about. So I'll do the standard things. I've been crazy busy with stuff that is yet to be announced. I've got 2 major projects that are yet to be announced, so stay tuned. And how are you going to find that? You got to follow the podcast, Nerdcognito, on every major podcast provider, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, Audible, iHeartRadio. It's on all of them. We drop every Tuesday with the audio show. It is 1 hour of nice, boiled down, condensed, nerdy goodness that's not just limited to the tabletop world. It's sort of just a conglomerate of all things nerd. We also, whether I like it or not, kicking and screaming, I started the YouTube channel for Nerdcognito, and we're now streaming every Saturday at 5 Eastern for the Saturday Speakeasy. That channel is a baby. It's still just days old, so please go to Nerdcognito on YouTube and subscribe and ring the bell and do all those YouTube-y things. That way, when the next announcement does come out, which might be on this show, if things line up with the calendar, you'll be in the know. And if it's not on this show, you'll be able to hear it on the podcast or at the YouTube channel. Lots of good stuff that I would love to tell you about, but it's just not ready for prime time yet. So hold on to your hats. Throw us the subscriptions where they count, on YouTube and at your podcast provider. We're really proud. We're looking at like 1,000 unique listeners now on our episodes, and that was a big milestone for us. We always flirted with it. Sometimes we were there, sometimes we weren't, but now it's consistently there, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you so much. Lots of good stuff coming. You just got to be patient and wait. That's all I got. So
I'm gonna go subscribe right now.
Yeah, go. It's the thing to do.
Yes.
Venger, I guess it is bedtime. Hey.
Yeah. Hey, I'm tired. Yeah, it's been a long week, long weekend. So yeah, I will bid you adieu, and thanks for everybody listening, and catch you on the next one.
See you.
Okay, see you.
All right, see you guys.
Before we continue for a little longer, I think I should comment that I believe that Diversity and Dragons is doing an after party live stream of Inappropriate Characters. I just love that. So I'll probably be popping in there, and I think Ryan might be too. Is that right?
Yeah. How genius, by the way, Double D. I love you and I hate you.
way to hook on to another live stream in a way to keep the fun going and at the same time benefit your own channel. That's genius, actually. So good on him. So be sure when we finish here, be sure to migrate over if you want even more interesting conversation to check out the Diversity and Dragons channel.
For sure.
Some more comments here from the chat. Reziel says,
star them. Pundit. If you hit the little star, it makes it easier for me to find them to call it out. We'll work on that next time.
I don't know how to star a comment.
We'll work on it next time. That's all right. Go ahead.
All right. I'm technologically illiterate.
I'm not going to push.
Yeah. Rezial says, Invisible College in the 30s, shut up and take my money. Well, I don't know if I'll end up writing a book about that or not. I might. A lot of the stuff I've done in my products have been things that I played, right? Like that to me is a very good way of producing content, is because if it's stuff you've actually played in your own campaigns and then you make a game about it or a book about it or an adventure about it or whatever, it'll have a different sort of feel, I think, than people who just like think up stuff in their head and write it out without having actually like done it, right? So that is certainly, it is a possibility. It'll depend on how that campaign goes, I guess. Let's see what else. L says, oh, what the heck is going on here? Okay. Timothy L, I guess, says the OGGM shat on Pundit for making the wussification video without even watching the video. Where did he do that? I don't really pay much attention to the OGGM, but all right. I'd be interested to see what he said about it.
Let's see what else we've got. Timothy Shanks got your new book in the mail. He's busy learning Castles and Crusades, so that will be next up.
Chris Miller says, Venger's card idea reminds me a bit of the old system called Masterbook. Yeah, I remember Masterbook. I think really he's doing it all just to like, what do you call it? Just to freak out the libs,
What do we got next?
Yeah, one of the things about my new book, my Heroes and Villains, is that there's bound to be stuff there that you can use. Like you can port a lot of these are incredible characters because they're all people from real life, right? And you can port them into other fantasy campaigns and whatever, change the names. Sometimes you probably won't even have to, because a lot of them are obscure to anyone who doesn't have a history degree, and probably to a lot of people who do.
Raziel's giving you a little rib about the assassin class. It's your favorite.
Yeah. But the book itself, besides being an RPG source book that is actually very usable, it's full of these biographies, these historical biographies that make for like incredible reading, because like some of these guys had the most insane lives. It's just fantastic. The Assassin's Class. Yeah, I never wanted to have an Assassin's Class, but people kept demanding it, so finally I did it.
Larenjenko says that talking about Dark Albion, he remembered a Predator fan film. Oh, you're digging deep, my friend. In medieval times, with a group of Templars hunting a predator, thinking he was some kind of demon. That sounds pretty cool, but when you say fan film, I gulp, right? Because there's just so much out there right now. If you remember he does remember the name. It's Predator Dark Times. So if you're interested in that, give it a check.
Judd Goswick says, Pundit channels the zeitgeist. Coming soon, RPG Pundit's pale girl who helps dwarves and finds true love. Well, unlike the other things, I am familiar with Snow White, right? So like, the weird thing is that I channeled the zeitgeist unconsciously, right? Like I started my Dark Albion campaign obviously after the Game of Thrones novels were written, but I never read them, and before the TV series started. And of course, I did eventually watch the TV series, right? But it was just really weird how all of a sudden, my campaign, like the book came out once. By the time the book was published, I think it was already there'd already been 1 or 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. But like, so I knew it was going to be compared to Game of Thrones, right? But because obviously I'm looking at these historical sources, and a lot of these products, The Witcher, Game of Thrones, whatever, they are inspired by historical influence. Because really, if you want to be a good writer, like especially if you're doing like novels, or I guess if you're making a video game or RPG settings, you're going to be better off rather than reading other like mainstream fantasy books is to look at history and mythology, because that's what the really great writers look at, you know. So bit of advice there.
Can I piggyback on that? That's one of the things that I'm working on. I've really been digging into Japanese ghosts, the Yuri, right? Because I'm going to have a whole segment of all of the different types. And there are so many more. You know, I went into it thinking, oh, I know there's like 3 or 4 of them. No, there's so much. And you just go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And it's fascinating to do the research too. Maybe I am a big nerd, but I really am having a good time broadening my knowledge of that so that I can put it into one of those things. And it's you are right on the money, Pundit. You gotta do the homework, because if you don't, it's obvious, right? We've all seen those products where it's slapped together and there is no knowledge base, right? There's no foundation that folks are building their creation on. And if you don't have that, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, one of the things I might do a source book of at some point is like in the connection to Sword and Caravan would be a setting in Southern Song Dynasty China in the exact same period as Sword and Caravan. And you know, I'll be looking forward to all the crazy monsters and supernatural stuff from Chinese mythology that would be put into that, you know.
Oh, it's so cool. So cool.
Chris Miller answered my question there while I was shilling. He said, yes, having just finished Heroes and Villains in the newest issue of Mad Scribe, Drive-Thru RPG has been very slow to print our products the past couple of months. Baptism of Fire will be done this year. Okay, so there you go. Chris Miller says, you know, he's my publisher for Sword and Caravan, for the Sword and Caravan line, and he's also doing Baptism of Fire. He is predicting that you will be able to buy it as a Christmas present for someone or for yourself or whatever. Let's hope that works out. You know, I know that the publishing side of it, one of the reasons I'm not a publisher is that it's fraught with all kinds of hassles, and that's why I prefer to just do the writing and split the profits with the publisher. But Chris Miller's great, so I'm sure that he's going to do his utmost to get it in on time. So hopefully we'll be seeing it by before the end of the year.
Al asked an inside question. When does the video from Randy from Biggest Geekus come out? It's out, man. It was on last week's Speakeasy, so go back in the archives and check it out. It's there, and it's hilarious if you haven't seen it yet. Up next, Cal, you are right on the money. Miguel and Sylvia, spectacular human beings with a really good mind for how to spin the OSR in their wretched verse. Everything Red Room that I have seen or that I have played, because we actually play it at our table, has been a big hit. And I think what's interesting is all of the minor cons, VentureCon included, because we're not giant like a Gen Con. When you go to those and look around or look at the photographs from the folks that are there, there's guaranteed to be a table playing wretched. So we really gotta help out those guys so that they can continue to do what they need to do, right? Creators create because they love, but they continue to create because they can make something from it. So we have to support each other all the way around.
And I'm blown away by how prolific they are. You know, I thought I was a really prolific writer, you know, like I put out a shit ton of content, but then like you look at the amount of stuff that they did in their first year. Now in their second year, they put out second editions of so many things, you know, like it's quite remarkable.
I always joke with Sylvia, it's been 6 weeks. When's your next book coming out? So,
Surly Unicorn says, can you play the Old Man of the Mountain though? Well, I don't know if you can play, but what I will say is that the Old Man of the Mountain is statted out and given a biography in Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, so you can go look up at what my take on him is. Let's see what else there is.
We've got lots of love for Venger as he tucked in and put his little cap on to go to bed.
Surly Unicorn says, go read about the War of the Roses instead of Game of Thrones. At least it's a complete story. Well, Yeah, or just pick up Dark Albion, you know.
Ironcaster says that those conventions that we were talking about is because they're authentic conventions. I agree with you 100%, brother. People at the smaller conventions are there because they love, A, playing the game, and B, the experience of being with other people. I don't want to say love other people, but they do in a sense. So they're not there for the lifestyle brand. They're not there to gain credit amongst their group. They're there to play the games and have a good time with other like-minded folks. You are spot on, friend.
Yep. Totally agree. All right. Anything else here?
Yeah, looks like we're winding down, and that's okay. Do you have any other topics that are sprouting out? I can talk about a tangential topic that has been occupying what little free time I have this week, and it's Lovecraftian. You're gonna hate it. It's double whammy, Pundit. It's Lovecraftian and it's a video game.
Okay, go ahead. Feel free.
There was a game that was produced over the last year called Dredge, and it's pretty much a time-wasting fishing simulator with a Lovecraftian spin, and it's short. It's less than 20 hours.
Okay.
I played through it last week, and all I'm going to say without spoilers is they got the feeling and the ending correct, and we'll leave it at that. So if you're looking for something that's not at the table because you can't scrounge up your group tomorrow night and you have an hour to kill, I highly, highly recommend Dredge, as in you are dredging the bottom of the sea. Excellent game. What else do we have coming in? Joe, yeah, the speed. He's commenting on the Red Room again. It blows me away at the speed that they work at. Something is always coming from the Red Room, and plans are already set for next year. And you're working with them, so you get to see it from behind the curtain, too. They are freaking machines, man.
Timothy Shanks says if you play an assassin, it should be like the ninja in One of the Oriental Adventures. No one knows he's an assassin. I think it should be an NPC class. Well, yeah, exactly. That was one of the reasons why I didn't want to have the Ismaili assassin as a class in Sword and Caravan, because that's exactly it. These guys would go into really deep cover, and then they would be given a mission, and then they'd go and kill someone, and very often end up dying in the process. So it's not the greatest player character class, but people insisted. So I set it up, and I put in the book that it's an NPC class, but it's fully loaded as a class that if a DM really wanted to, you could allow it as a PC class.
And we are caught up to real time, Pundit. That doesn't happen often.
Yeah, I know. I always fall behind on the comments.
Any last questions or things that you folks want to talk with us about before we cruise on over to Double D's after party? There's lots of buzz about this OGGM stuff. I'm not commenting on it because I didn't see it, so I don't have a point of reference, right? I do have a big fat mouth and it's full of opinions, but I try to keep those opinions about stuff that I at least know a little bit about. And I haven't seen or heard anything about it, so I'm intentionally dodging. So those of you that are lighting up my DMs on Twitter right now, why aren't you calling out this comment? That's why, because right now I don't have enough knowledge about what's going on. And there's always a pissing contest in the OSR. It's just, which person does the token land on tonight? So,
it's funny because I don't tend to watch any of the three that were mentioned there automatically, and none of them. I guess all three of them made a point of not advertising it in a way that I would notice. I guess because this is the first I've heard of that.
Yeah, I don't want to dig into it, and I get it. You guys are on fire, and maybe I just dropped the ball on seeing this, or maybe it's been a busy week. But
well, I mean, if I didn't notice it, it was about me. You can't blame yourself, right?
Ironcaster has a question for us. How do you feel about writing in rule books? I think people hold up books as some sort of sacred text, and how dare you scribble in your rule book is sacrilege. Yes, it is. I have a friend that I've played with now for going on 25 years, and the running gag for decades has been whenever a correction or errata or even a typo gets found, he gets a pen and very visibly and intentionally writes and makes that correction in his source book. It just bothers me. Just print out the errata and stick it in the back, man. Now, as I've aged, I'm better about it. But like we would have like knockdown, drag out, I'm throwing pizza at you fights when I was in my 20s with this guy. Now it's just he'll do it and smile at me, and I'm just like, you're an asshole, and we leave it at that. Pundit, do you care if people write in the books?
What is it that you don't like about that?
It's my stuff. It's only child coming out, right?
Okay, but wait, are you talking about someone writing in his book or someone writing in one of your books?
Yes and yes.
I would not be happy if someone grabbed a book that I own and put a note in it. Okay, that I would be opposed to, of course. Like I can understand that because it's your book, right?
Right.
But as someone who was trained in the humanities, writing notes in books is just like almost automatic, so I've got tons of notes in my books, including in my RPG books, because I don't look at it from the point of view of a collector. I look at it from the point of view of its practical purposes, right? So, if you look at especially sort of campaign books, it'll have margin notes all over the place because, if I'm using it to keep track of things in the campaign or whatever, or making alterations, that's something that I will do on a regular basis with my own books. But I would never write in someone else's book,
He would, back in the day, he would grab mine and write in it just to rib me, right? But because he knew that I did look at it and I wanted to preserve it, even though by the time we were done with it, I think back to like my second edition books. I know you love second edition, but we played the hell out of it. The spines they're busted, pages were coming loose on the binding, but I still tried. Gosh darn it. Timothy says he scribbled in his all of the time. Judd Goswick says that's allowed. He used to be Pollyanna. I'm still Pollyanna, Judd. I'm sorry. And there is no logical reason why. This is the crazy thing. Judd hit the nail on the head. There's no reason why it bothers me. I can't say it bothers me because with any specificity. It just does. It's like nails on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
Eric C. uses sticky notes for errata. I'm not a post-it guy.
Well, those have the benefit that they also act as bookmarks, so it's actually kind of clever.
I did for a while, and Ironcaster, I'll get back to that. I did for a while use tabs on my books, especially ones that weren't indexed very well, like in the late 90s through, I want to say, early aughts, right? I was a big fan of tabbing the books myself, but they came off clean, right? So my OCD didn't kick in. It is a fun argument to have, Ironcasters, like modern wheelchairs or diversity stuff. Yeah.
Well, I think we should get finishing off here so that, I don't know if Double D is still on here or not, but if he is, you might want to head off and get ready to start your own stream there. Thank you to everybody who's been watching. And we are going to be doing our next episode, assuming that Venger is on board with it. I guess that would be on the 19th of November.
19th is what it looks like. Yep.
Yeah. So mark that date on your calendars. 19th November will be our next episode. We might have a guest star. I don't know. We're going to see.
And if that changes or there's any updates, make sure that you are following Inappropriate Characters on Twitter. We resurrected that account, as well as being subscribed to Inappropriate Characters right here on YouTube, because in the community section, we'll put all of that out. And of course, we'll tweet it out to you as well.
There you go. And yeah, so subscribe and hit the notification bell here. And feel free to share this video with anyone that you think will be interested in or will be pissed off about it. And, follow our individual channels. Ryan's now on YouTube, so you can follow him if you haven't yet. And if you haven't followed me or Vendor, I don't know what you're doing here, but be sure to follow us too.
Sounds like a plan. Do all of the things, hit all of the bells, do all of the subscriptions. We really do thank you. It's always a fun time when we get together. Remember, Double D's channel, when we go off the air, is the place to be. I guess that's it for us.
Just in case someone doesn't know who Double D is.
That's Diversity and Dragons on YouTube. You do a quick search for that, and you will find it. He's got a really cool new badass logo. Love it, Double D. So I imagine that we will see most of you there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in about 4 weeks on the next Inappropriate Characters.
Thank you.